Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Crystal Hinkle. I'm part of the team here at Syncro, and so happy to have Andy here today.
Hey everybody, I'm Andy. I'm one of the senior product managers here at Syncro.
Yes, so thank you all for joining us. We're really excited. We've been doing a few of these webinars because we're all really excited about policy inheritance and hearing some really great feedback. And so I think today what we'd like to do is kind of just dive right in. I love, if Andy, if you want to take just a moment to kind of talk through just the idea of policy inheritance and why did we build this and what was the thought process around it. And then of course, like we're going to take some time, we're going to show you how it functions, how it impacts your instance, how to use it. And then we will take whatever questions you have. So we will use the Q&A. I'll kind of be monitoring that as Andy is going along, but I think we'll just hop right into it.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. So yeah, one of the things we were really looking to accomplish with this is we'd hear a lot from smaller MSPs as they started to grow. They're starting to get 500 plus assets, saying, geez, it'd be really nice if there was a way to manage policies in a better way. And we were like, you know what, we agree. We've long had a rule where you basically apply a single policy to a single asset and go on from there, which works okay at a smaller number of assets. It becomes a little bit untenable when you start to get into the 1,000 asset plus range. And then we heard obviously those similar comments from larger MSPs coming on the platform saying kind of the same thing. I've got 1,000 assets, I want to do it like this. And we're like, well, you really can't. So we took all that feedback to heart and we built that into policy inheritance. This is a way to manage policies defined by the need to grow any number of assets. It shouldn't matter how big you get. You should never be able to theoretically grow out of what we built here. And then the second component to that is we are always looking for, I say excuses, but also say reasons to make our recurring invoice system better. That's kind of one of the key criteria of Syncro that really saves you a ton of time, earns you a lot of money. And we wanted a way to build policy management into that in a much more robust way. So that's kind of the second component of what we delivered. For everybody who is currently a Syncro customer, just to give you a status of where this is at, we have officially rolled it out to all users. So every single user now has it. This is the first time that we've ever done this as an opt-in. And what I mean by that is everyone is going to get the feature automatically opted in for them starting the week of December 6th. Between now and then, and we've probably had half of our users so far enable it. There's obviously hundreds more throwing it on every day. But between now and then, we wanted to give users the ability to turn it on when it makes the most sense for them. I understand, I was an MSP for a long time. I get how you can be in the middle of a major project or you're just not in the space where you can take on a completely new UI change and functionality change. So you want to do it next week, the week after, whenever, that's fine. Again, we're going to be officially rolling it out to everybody, automatically opting them in the week of December 6th. So anybody that wants to go turn it on for themselves now that has a Syncro instance, if you go into your RMM preferences under admin settings, there's a button to enable it there. And then for everybody on this webinar who is not currently a Syncro user and they're investigating what we did, what all the hullabaloo is about, I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in and show you exactly what we did here. And then feel free to start asking your questions now as they come up. Crystal will field those and then we'll answer those here in a bit. Can you see my screen, Crystal?
Okay, yes, cool. I can.
So what you're looking at here is what I'm going to refer to as the old policy builder. I say old because this isn't what you'll have once you enable it, but this is what a lot of folks are going to see today until they do. And basically one of the core things we were looking to change was this policy builder shows a whole bunch of stuff that the policy doesn't do. And you kind of have to scroll through everything to just find out what the policy does, which in this instance is just enable Splashtop. So we really wanted to kind of go back to the drawing board with that. And this is what we came up with. It's a brand new UI. Everything is neatly categorized. This is a brand new policy. And you notice that you don't see anything here because it's not actually doing anything. So if I wanted to enable remote access, whoops, that's not it. I turn it on here, and this is the same stuff that was there before. So anybody wondering, is everything going to be different when we come on policy inheritance? As far as the builder is concerned, everything you had before exists here. There's no new functionality except for one thing, which I'll explain in a minute. We just completely have redone the UI. as you add something to a category, you'll see it starts to count. So if I want to go and I want to add some alerts, everything is sectioned off and everything is individualized. So you can just start adding individual things as you want. If you want to take it off, you can just click the X, or you can kill the whole section if you want to. Relatively straightforward. So I'll just add a couple. We'll add a couple checks here. Let's see. Okay, and then maybe I'll add some disk monitoring as an example, and that looks pretty good. So you can see that I've got two sections for here. I've got one for remote access, and under policy view, you can see an aggregate of everything that is enabled on this policy, which is 3 sections. If I click policy overview, and it'll tell you this is a read-only view of everything this policy is doing and nothing that it's not doing. So this is like a one-click default view that anytime you go into a policy, you'll see, and it's exactly what's happening. Now, I mentioned there was one functionality change, and it's going to sound a little stupid when I say it, but bear with me. In the old model, there was basically checked for the particular item is enabled. And then if you unchecked it, that meant that it's ignored, meaning the policy doesn't care. It's just going to ignore it. This isn't going to physically do anything. Because everything is now additive, meaning I physically have to add it to the policy before it does anything, unchecked now has a different meaning, and that's disabled. So I'll show you the inheritance tree in a minute, but basically what this is saying is at whatever level I apply this policy at, this HD Smart Failure check is going to apply to that level and every level I have below it. If I uncheck it, this is effectively saying at whatever level I have this item at, it's going to disable it, even if it was enabled at a higher level. Another way to say it is it's an override, and that would apply to everything, again, below it. If you don't want something to be considered as part of the policy, just remove it, or you can remove the whole section. That's effectively the ignore mechanic. Okay, so that's actually building a policy. This is where you're going to do your policy assignment. This is an actual customer record, and we've added this new assets and policies folder here. So this is what every customer is going to get. They're going to get a top level folder. It's immutable, meaning you can't rename it, you can't edit it. It's always going to be there, and it's going to match the name of the actual customer. And you can see here that policies are now applied to folders instead of directly being applied to assets. So this is my top level policy. And if you want to see what I have in here, it's some basic stuff. I've got some alerts. I've got my remote access for Splashtop. I've got a tray icon for live chat because that's something I really like. You know, basic stuff, third-party updates, Windows updates, things like that. And because I put it here at the top, that means no matter how complex or of a folder structure I create below this, or how many assets I add to it, everything that's at this top level policy is going to cascade down and affect everything that applies below it. And I'll show you an example of that here. This is a little bit more of a standard customer, what you would see. This is my top level policy, same as before. And then I made a servers and a workstations subfolder. That's pretty common. What's not common is, just for example purposes, I don't have a full-blown server policy and a workstation policy. I just added Bitdefender to one and MCSoft to the other so I could show you how inheritance works. So when the inheritance mechanic kicks in, what's going to happen is we're going to take all of the relevant policies and we're going to merge them together into something we're calling an effective policy. And you can view the effective policy at any level, and that's going to tell you what's actually being applied to assets at any given level. So if I were to click show effective policy here at the top level, it's basically going to be everything I just showed you that was in my top level policy, because this is all that's being applied. However, when more than one item is going to be applied, like in this case, you're going to see everything that was here, and now you're going to see the addition of Bitdefender. And I apologize, I don't have Bitdefender wired up on the account, so it's talking about a trial here. But you can see that Bitdefender is enabled, and then all of my other stuff is still present. And then same thing if I look at this workstations folder, instead of Bitdefender, now you're going to see that MCSoft is kicked in, and then all the rest of the stuff from my top level policy remains. That's how inheritance works. Now, this is what an actual asset looks like here. And assets can also have effective policies. And that's because you'll see here that I don't have a policy directly applied to this asset, but you could if you wanted to. So if you have one final addition that you wanted to add specific to an individual asset instead of doing it at a higher level, or you had something that you wanted to override only for a specific asset, you can absolutely do that. And everything you see here, like these assets, they're fully drag and droppable. And the folders are drag and droppable too. This is a super easy system to work with. So in this example, I've got one additional subfolder under workstations, And this is what I would call a micro policy. This policy just enables backups. That's its only purpose in life. That's all it does. Right now, this asset doesn't have it because it doesn't reside in this folder. So if I just drag it from here to here, now Syncro Backups is actually deploying on this asset. That's how easy it is. I didn't have to go in and adjust policies on the asset or do anything like that. I just put the asset in the place I wanted it to reside, and it does everything for me. If I want to take it back out, it's going to say, hey, Syncro Backups is enabled. Do you sure you want to do that? Yes, we're just testing here. And now it's back where it was. So management is that easy. And you can also multi-select things within the same folder. And if you have a real complex structure here, you can actually use this move asset, and it will allow you to pick a specific folder and move it if this thing is just huge. And we've seen some really interesting, huge concepts come out over this. So it's kind of cool to see that. This is an example, a real world example that I'll use from my MSP days. It was very similar to what I was trying to accomplish here. So here I had a larger customer. They had a West Coast office and an East Coast office. Initially, they just had the West Coast office. Everything was fine. My MSP was in Las Vegas, so I was in the West Coast too. And then they opened this East Coast office, and it kind of screwed it up for me. We were big on live chat as our means of ticket injection. That just happened to work really well for us. And when it came to the East Coast office, we assumed the same thing, and it was a terrible assumption because these people would come in at 9 o'clock Eastern time. They would send in a support request over live chat. We wouldn't see it till 3 hours later, and by the time we responded, it's their lunch. And as this went on, we started breaching SLA after SLA because we couldn't get our responses quick enough because of the time offset. So what we had to do for the East Coast office was we actually hid their tray icon because we had to teach them to do email to ticket instead of live chat to ticket. The West Coast office remained exactly the same because we continued to triage tickets the same way. So it's cool here because the tray icon is enabled in this top level policy, but here it's disabled. So if I look at my effective policy, you can see that here we're actually hiding the tray, and this is effectively an override because it's enabled at my top level. So when I break this up, you're basically going to see what you'd expect. I've got servers and workstations, and I've got my servers policy and my workstations policy. Under a West Coast office, it was largely the same thing. And then they said, hey, I know you said you're not really going to do our home computers, but would you mind doing some? We've got people who are not ready to come back to the office, or they're working at night now because of COVID, whatever the situation is. And I'm like, you know what? Sure, that's fine. So we added a home computer folder because this one's going to be managed a little bit differently. And one of the keys here is that we hid the tray icon because, as anyone knows who accidentally gave out their real cell phone number to a customer, you're getting calls on Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, whatever. And then you're getting like chats at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night, which is super annoying, with the expectation that you're there just doing nothing other than waiting for them to come in. So what I'm really trying to demonstrate here is that you can use this same policy across as many customers or as many folders as you want to accomplish the same thing at different levels. For instance, here I'm hiding it, the tray, and one subset of computers at a specific office. Here I'm doing the exact same thing, but I'm hiding it for the entire office. And if I had an asset in here in this example, I could actually hide the tray icon for one specific asset out of all the assets at an office. So that's kind of the power of what this brings. Now, there's one other thing that we just added, which is exciting. And we allow you to bulk assign the top level policy, because I can hear a lot of folks saying, oh, dude, I've got thousands of customers. This is awesome, but I don't want to have to go into each one and individually assign above level policy, where you don't have to. So there's two ways to do this. Obviously, you pick your policy. So for me, it'd be my top level policy. And if I was to go ahead and confirm this, it's going to apply this policy at every single customer's top level folder. Now, if you've got some that are very specific and everybody's got those VIP customers that have to be treated differently, go ahead and set those up the way you want them first. And then you can just check this box, and it's basically going to skip any customer that has a top level folder already. So it's just going to hit everybody else, the more generic ones that can all be the same. So the last thing everybody wants to know, and this is more for existing customers, not for folks who are investigating Syncro. This is what's going to happen when we migrate. And when I say migrate, I mean you go into the RMM preferences in your admin settings and you physically click the opt-in, or again, starting that week of December 6th, when we officially begin automatically opting everybody in. We're going to go into every single one of your customers, and we're going to look at all of the assets, and we're going to find out how many individual policies are being applied at any one customer. So in this example, there was 2 policies in total. I had servers policies and I had a workstation policy. We're going to create a subfolder for each, and we're going to go ahead and apply the relevant policy to each. And then we're going to move all respective assets into their respective folder. So what this effectively does is you're moving from the old model onto the new model, while all of your policies and the way that they're being applied to the assets is identical. Nothing will change until you start to go into here and physically change this to be more efficient for your specific business. And for folks wondering what happens to their existing policies, the things I was showing you over here, everything that you had enabled here is going to flow over here. So it's all going to be exactly the same. Again, there's no different functionality. Your assets are going to get all the same stuff they were getting before. None of that will change. And then the last thing I want to talk about is this is a quick snippet of our recurring billing system. Now, for folks that are on Syncro who aren't currently using our billing today, and folks just investigating the platform for the first time, this is where a lot of the power in Syncro comes from. The amount of time that you can save by literally billing this kind of stuff when you sleep dynamically, meaning these invoices will count items dynamically at the time they fire, and we know that that's going to change from month to month, and it doesn't matter. You'll never lose money to paperwork errors again with a system like this. So we've already had a ton of things in here that you can do. We have an asset counter where we'll count every asset under that specific customer, and you can say, cool, I want to bill them $150 an asset or whatever that's going to be. You can even bill by specific asset type. So if you only want to bill for one price for servers, one price for workstations, perfectly fine. If you want to bill assets that fall into a saved asset search, you can do that. It's kind of limitless the way that you can bill this out. And this flows into everything. If you want to count employees or employees with certain custom fields, like if they're active versus inactive ones. Backups, we go full bore where you can bill for every single backup license. You can give people like a 10 license inclusion as part of their contract and bill, $10 for every license beyond that. You can do the same thing for storage. You could give them global credits for storage. It goes very, very deep. And for folks that didn't hear that we recently released Splashtop as our native remote access integration. This also spills over into your end users as well, meaning if you want to enable remote access for end users, you can now do that. Where Splashtop is free for all of your technicians, there is a per contact charge for enabling it for your customers. We will dynamically count that even, and you can go ahead and bill customers for this. It's so easy. And you can have as many line items on a single recurring invoice, dynamically counting whatever you want at the same time. So what we've added with policy inheritance is this policy folder mechanic. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bill this out to labor because effectively this is going to be contract labor. And under this specific customer, this is the one that I showed you before, my standard customer. I've got my servers, I've got my workstations, and I've got this secondary backup folder. So if I want to say, cool, I'm going to bill for, let's say $100 for every workstation that falls into that folder. I'll go ahead and add that. And then I can do the same thing for servers. So I'm going to again bill to my labor product. I'm going to say, cool, I'm going to do my servers folder and I'm going to bill $150 for every server. So you can see already that this is going to give you an estimate. I had one asset in each and it's $250. Now, if I go ahead and I onboard a second workstation tomorrow, well, this is going to show $350 when this fires. If I take one off, it's going to automatically adjust. So again, it's like set it and forget it. You never have to worry about it again. On the last webinar I did, somebody contacted me after. I was like, dude, it would be super cool if like you could go into this workstations folder and it would count all assets in all nested folders. And I was like, you know what? That is a sick idea. So we just added this Friday, I think. Friday, I think. And so anyways, if you turn this on, it's going to count. It doesn't matter how complex this gets. Again, it's going to count every single asset in that. I like this idea so much that we're actually adding this into scripts, automated remediation, saved asset searches. So anywhere you find this folder control, you're going to be able to select this optionally if you want to as well. So that's kind of the feature end to end. I'm happy to take on any questions that y'all might have.
Yes. Okay. This is more of, I think, just UX. Can we get a button to expand or collapse all folders in the assets and policies view?
You I'm thinking, yes. Can you kind of give me your use case for that? Because normally you would be triaging like a certain amount of like you'd be going to one specific office or one specific type and adjusting things there. So let me know specifically like what you're looking to accomplish on a regular basis. I will add one other thing, that this UI, we've got a lot of feedback, and thank you, by the way, for everybody that's been giving that. This is the one feature that people universally seem to really, really love. And people love this UI so much that we've heard a lot of feedback about, hey, can you make this the actual asset view, which we have like an asset list view, which is just like 100, listed. It's like a list of assets basically, but just very Excel-like. And people really love this visual view. And so I think some of the feedback we're getting is like, hey, can you merge this and make that? And yes, I would love to do that. Yes, it's on the radar. But there were so many changes that were required to roll this out efficiently and realistically that couldn't be included in part of that. But I hear you loud and clear. That's something that we're definitely looking to do.
Awesome. And Matt's asking, and I know you covered it at the beginning. So Matt, if you do have additional questions here, the question was, what happens to our existing policies when we opt in, or does this go live by default? So it's live on your account. You can opt in. Obviously, like I think you even mentioned as well that there'll be kind of a time frame where you need to do that by where it's a manual thing. But yeah, just that it was so thoughtful the way that we rolled this out, and the way that we accounted for how policies used to look and how they look now, and really seamless for everyone. So if you missed that part, Matt, if you have more questions, just let us know. And then I think this is just a quick answer. Which has priority, top down or bottom up?
Yeah, it's top down. So let me share this again really quick. So basically in this example, as I was showing you, like if I wanted to, let's see, what was the hide tray icon on here? So here in this top level policy, I have my tray icon enabled. This is everything that's cascading down. And then whatever would happen at a lower level would be either be additive if it was just something you're adding, but if you're talking about overrides, it would override the lower you go. So basically overrides are bottom up, and that's by design. So normally this would be like, hey, this is everything I want every single customer to have across the board. And then think of it like as you go down deeper and deeper, even right to the asset level, that's where you want to be applying exceptions, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I guess I should have said this right before you closed out, but will you show everyone just in the admin section how to turn this on?
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm not going to actually have the button, but I can show you where it is. Because once it's enabled.
Oh yeah, because you've already pressed it.
It goes away. But yeah, let's see here. So if you go in your admin settings, under RMM settings here, there's going to be preferences. And there'll be a button here with yellow text. It's basically saying like, here, hey, here's what to expect. It's going to take a couple minutes, and there'll be an enable policy inheritance button here. This is where you're going to turn it on. Migration takes anywhere between 1 and 5 minutes, depending on how many assets you guys have.
Awesome. And I know you did cover this too, just like to say it out loud. Will we still be able to have global policies that we can apply to any number of clients, or we need to create new policies for each client? So we do have the global, like top level policy.
Not only the top level policy, but again, I'll reiterate that top level policy that I showed you can apply to every single customer. So it's not like it's customer specific. So like as an example, we rolled out Syncro backup. So if you're like, hey, this is a new feature, I don't want to go to 5,000 customers and turn it on, you can just go to that one policy, turn it on, and any folder or any customer that's on, it will enable it automatically for you.
Perfect. And I think that just answered Dez's question. Let's see here. Can an asset be in multiple levels?
No, an asset can only be in one level, but it can have multiple levels of policies being applied to it.
Love it. And Matt, this is a great question because I don't know the answer. What happens to policies that do not have any assets in them presently when we switch it over?
What will happen is you will see a subfolder created under your customer matching that policy name and having that policy applied to it. You just won't see any assets that fall into it. So if you happen to have like a whole bunch of policies Well, you know what? I apologize. I take it back. That's not going to happen because you don't have it applied on any policies. So sorry, that one took me by surprise. So what'll happen is nothing. It won't add subfolders because the policy is not being applied to any asset. It will still live in your policies list and you can just delete it without issue. It won't make its way into any of the customer folders I showed you. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you. I believe this might be just a similar question asked in a different way. Can you apply multiple policies per folder?
No, it's one policy per folder. You can go, the top level folder is one, and then you can go 5 subfolders deep, and then you can also put one on the asset itself. So you could theoretically be merging 7 different policies between them, but you can't do multiple policies per folder.
Great. Okay, I think I can grab these next two. So from Mark, if we want to bill by user, how would the user get added to Syncro? Would we have to manually add them? So to bill per contact, you do have to add them into Syncro as a contact per customer. You can import contacts through a CSV. You can also have a setting, like if someone submits a ticket from a specific domain, you could have it automatically create that contact, but yes, you do have to enter them into Syncro. Any possibility of prorating when adding a device in the middle of the month? That's not currently a possibility. Andy's here listening, so.
Are you talking about like for AV or something?
My guess is showing like in policies how you just showed how you can bill per policy. Like if you add an asset to a policy, like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's actually a good suggestion. If you haven't already, write into support on that one. Because that would be a pretty interesting mechanic. And I don't want to say it's easy to do. In my mind it is, but I might ask a dev to like, dude, no, it's not easy. But I'll find out for you.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to read this one out loud from John. Do I have to enable a default policy? I have unique policies per customer workstation / server VM / physical. I don't really want to set a generic policy as I want every policy defined per customer.
No, you don't have to have a default policy. In fact, that top level folder I showed you does not have to have a policy at all. No, you can even, or if you just want to use folders to organize assets and not have any policies on them at all, you could theoretically do that. I would say though that the goal of this is really to find all of the stuff that's common amongst all your customers, and there's probably going to be like AV deployment or even basic checks like HD Smart Check. Like I'm sure you're going to want smart checks on every asset possible. It's just going to save you time and money. That's the stuff I would think about including in a default top level policy, and then everything else is kind of what's unique to that customer. But there's nothing stopping you from doing it the way that you proposed either. That works as well.
Perfect. And I actually really love this question because I want to hear your answer. Why would I use a top level policy to disable a policy setting?
You wouldn't at the top. I guess it does allow you to do that, but at the top level, you would never want to really disable something. If you did, and then you enabled it somewhere else, that enable would override the disable, if that makes sense. So yeah, really, you wouldn't want to. That would kind of be the equivalent of not adding it at all, realistically.
Okay. Richard wants to know, how does this change the installation of application utilizing third-party installers? So let's say I want to install Adobe Reader on only 3 computers and not the rest.
It works the same way any other policy setting would. So like, let's say that you've got, however your structure is, you can make a separate policy specific for third-party patches. And in this case, it would just be like, I want to install Adobe Reader. And then you could apply that to those 3 specific assets in question and handle it that way. If you wanted to handle it as a group, you could also like group your one-off assets and name the folder whatever you want and apply it at the folder levels. That way, if you want to drag an asset into or out of that, it would automatically apply for you, whichever makes more sense to you.
Perfect. Let's see. With the new UI, is there a setting that converts all assets to the new UI, or do I have to create new policies? So Curtis, where we showed in the admin section, RMM preferences, that's where you can turn on policy inheritance and it will convert your previous policies to the new policy setup. So You wouldn't necessarily have to create anything new. Anything to add there, Andy? I think.
No, you got it.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. If I have single customer users, how can I give them permission to adjust policies for that customer?
Yeah, okay, so what Jeremy's asking is we have a methodology used for co-managed IT. So like if you wanted to give another user outside of your organization, it would be a paid user account, access to Syncro and only manage their assets, their ticket, whatever. You can do that. However, policies aren't in a way where it's segmented customer specific. So they would be able to apply policies, but they wouldn't be able to inherently go and edit policies since that's more of a global setting.
Awesome. Okay. And yes, Scott, this is being recorded. So yes, this will be available to you on our YouTube channel. Let's see here. I'm going to read this one out loud also, Andy, from Chris. I did not totally see this, but I think it was related to top level policy. But we would like to set certain monitors for all client computers with the exception of 1 or 2 policies. We want to go in and update this. All client policies have it in effect, all the others as we add things. Can you go into that a little more, or did I miss something?
I might need you to clarify a little bit. I'm having a hard time following that one. I think if I understand what you're asking, you're saying that you want stuff going to all client computers with the exception of 1 or 2 policies. I'm not sure if you meant 1 or 2 assets. Basically at the top level, that's kind of everything you want for everybody. If you ever find that you have like a folder of assets that you need to behave differently, that's when you would just apply your overrides or additions to that folder specifically. But if I'm not understanding, which I think I might not be, can you kind of re-ask that? I want to make sure I get your question.
Perfect. And yeah, thank you, Michael, for clarifying regarding the UX for the policies. No real use case. Just wanted to not have to drill down into nested folders every time I go into the view, just to list the assets and folders. Okay, let's see here. All right, this is actually regarding Splashtop. So maybe this was mentioned when you brought that up. Can I start deploying Splashtop through Syncro if I can enter a unique Splashtop deployment code? Previously, I had to use a single deployment ID. This did not work for me as I don't want all customers' computers falling into one large pool in Splashtop. We still prefer to deploy our own Splashtop licenses. Currently, it's done via deployment scripts per client.
Yeah, so no, when I said Splashtop, I was talking about our native Splashtop RMM, we'll call it, which is what we deploy through our policies. We do also support BYO, bring your own Splashtop if you have an instance you prefer to use and have us deploy it. But we do work off a single deployment code. So if you need to have it dumping into specific places within your Splashtop instance, you would need to script that with your custom deployment codes, doing it the way that you're talking about.
Perfect. This is a great question. I don't know the answer to. From Jordan wants to know, they did turn on policy inheritance yesterday. They got a notice saying some of the automated remediation needed to be fixed, but they weren't sure which ones needed to be fixed. That it didn't look like they were linked to policies. Is there a way for them to see which ones needed to be fixed?
Well, okay, so there should be 2 things that happen. In the bottom left under to-dos, we do flag things that are no longer compatible with policy inheritance. And there is, if you go in automated remediations, there should also be like a red exclamation point highlighting ones that are problematic. I have heard one other report where an automated remediation that didn't qualify was flagged. So maybe that's what's happening. But basically all you need to check for is there is a policy condition, an automated remediation condition referencing a specific policy that no longer applies since a single policy no longer applies to a single asset. So just check for that, and that's all you'd have to change. If you don't have a policy condition in a remediation, then it's fine.
Great. Okay. To answer Chris's question with the global policy, can we make changes to it and it will auto update all assets? Yes. The answer to that is yes.
And that applies to any policy at any level. If you update the policy itself, anywhere it's applied, it'll go ahead and take hold instantly.
Great. Catherine's wondering what would be a good report for them to print off listing policies applied to which customer and assets?
There isn't really one because again, there is no longer a concept of one asset, or excuse me, one policy being applied to one asset. If you want, I know you're on the Facebook group, so if you want to PM me like your specific use case, I can talk to you about that more.
Perfect. And then this is a great question from David. If we are billing based on asset search, like XYZ is installed on ABC or DF policy, what will happen to that billing?
Okay, so if you were billing previously based on a policy, which was something we used to allow, that will no longer work. We did make some changes in the system to allow it to work for, I think, 30 days. I think when we go ahead and automatically opt people in is when that will stop working. But if what you're saying is like you have a saved asset search and it's looking for software that's installed, the saved asset search will continue to work as it always did. The only ones that need to be updated are ones that were specifically referencing a specific policy. And now you would just update those to use that policy folder mechanic that I showed everybody earlier.
Love it. And great question from Clarence. What is the best way to deal with Mac specific policies?
I would probably say, and it's up to you. I don't know if you have like a couple Macs that a couple customers are like, you're a huge Mac house. The one thing you could do is you could segregate, like I did servers and workstations. So you could segregate Macs and Windows if you wanted to do it that way and apply policies to each. The policies do work universally between each. Obviously, some things don't apply, like Windows updates isn't obviously going to apply to Mac. But I would probably do like your top level policy the same. And then as you go down deeper and you have separate like Mac and Windows policies, I would probably count those as the exceptions because there's a lot of stuff you're still going to want to have on each.
Perfect. Question on Andy's screen. There was the tabs assets and policies. I have enabled the new features, but mine still shows two separate assets in RMM and policies. Why?
No idea. I've never seen that before. So I would grab a screen of that and write that into support. Policies was never even a tab that was on there. This is just a brand new one that we added. So I don't know what you're seeing in addition. So yeah, please send that into support. I'll have a look.
Cool. Okay. And then this is actually kind of building off of like the request regarding the reports. So I'll just read it out loud. It seems like this might be something, wondering if there will be a way to query in a report to show the list of customers that have a policy applied to some sort of folder or asset, not something granular, but just say customer A and customer C use X policy in some way.
That's something that's come up a couple of times. I'm still waiting for more of like the use case stuff for the reason to need that. But I think we'll probably get some here shortly. So one of the things that we're talking about is adding it into the policy itself, where there'll be some kind of thing and it would basically give you we call it a magic filter. It's not one you could necessarily search for, but you could bring up a list of it. We can do some magic on the back end to allow folks to see like a list of assets with this policy applied. So I'll say it's on the radar. I can't guarantee it is or isn't going to happen though.
Okay. Okay, Michael, if I want to set up folders the same way for many clients, is there a template system or the way that folders are created? You can duplicate, right?
There is not a template system today. The one thing that I think we're going to add based on user feedback is we are going to let you make like a default structure. So, because normally once you've got some people set up, the template system is kind of useless because you can't go in and override some stuff that's already in place. But when you add a new customer, we could certainly set them up in the common way that you like, where it's got, your top level with your top level policies, servers, workstations, however you want to structure it. So that is something that we're seriously considering. I bet that one happens sooner than later.
Perfect. And I believe the answer is yes to Nate's question, but I'll read it out loud. Can you stack billing entries? For example, I have 10 workstations in a folder and want to bill for each workstation, but I have 3 of them in a subfolder with backups and want to bill more for those. Technically, the 3 with backups were already showing up in the counter for workstations, but I need them to show up a second time at a different rate for the backups.
Yeah, so when I said you can literally do anything, I mean you can literally do anything with the billing system. So you can have multiple line items counting different things. And even if you wanted to bill out like one rate for all of those assets, you can use that new nested folder checkbox we added. And then in the backups folder, you could just count that folder and be like, cool, you're paying 25 bucks for the backups, a license, or however you want to structure that. So yeah, 1000% you can do that.
Perfect. Glenn wants to know, is there a best practice for Syncro assets that are offboarded? I had an offboarding policy before, but I don't want it to bill for an asset that has been offboarded, but I want the asset history.
Yeah, what you can do is when you you can make a folder. So like, let's say you've got a customer you have to take off, or you have to offboard an asset. Just make an offboarding. I'm sure you already said you have an offboarding policy. So just add a folder to their structure called offboarding, drag the asset into that, and it will go ahead and apply whatever you want in terms of taking, AV off or backup, whatever you want. And then in terms of the counters, if it's out of the folder that you were counting, it will no longer apply. I will add that down the road, I really, really want to find a better way to offboard assets. So that's something on my radar for anybody wondering.
Great. Mark would like to know, how do I tell if this is the case for us? The part regarding recurring invoices that reference legacy asset policies will need to be manually updated.
So you should see, let's see. You should get a notice that those are outdated and they need to be updated. So if you go into them, anything that's billing a saved asset search with a policy folder would qualify for that. And basically, you would just change those to now count off the new folder mechanic.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Ari has a use case for the expanding the full tree. There is a policy that I want to delete, but is telling me that it is assigned somewhere. I'm trying to find where it is assigned in order to change it there so I can delete it.
Oh, well, first of all, Ari, that's a good use case. And thank you, because that actually gives me a better use case for finding out where what folders and assets have a specific policy where that makes sense. You're trying to delete them to clean things up and you have to go off and find it. So there is not a way to do that today, obviously, but yes, great suggestion. Thank you for adding that clarity.
And also from Ari, just wondering, the drag and drop in the policy tree only works in Chrome. Do we have plans for getting this to work in Firefox or no?
It's only, so I actually didn't know it didn't work in Firefox, but we officially only support Chrome. I knew there was an issue with Safari specifically. However, you can still use that move mechanic to do it as a stopgap if you really want to use Firefox or Safari or something.
Awesome.
And when I say the move mechanic, the move button in the header there will still work.
Okay. All right. How you doing, Andy? These are rapid fire questions. You hanging in there?
We're good to go.
Okay. So if I show tray icon at top level and then in a lower level, hide tray icon. If I hide tray icon at the top level, then show again, will it pass that down globally? Or will I still need to drill down and show tray icon in the lower level that specifically hit it?
Dude, I don't know. You just broke my brain. Who asked this one? I need to read it really quick.
Matt Seaver.
Okay.
At 10:36.
Got it. It will pass down globally. So if I understand you correctly, overrides are happening from the bottom up. So if you've got the show tray icon at the top level, and then at a lower level, you hide it, everything between the top and that lower level is going to have it. When it hits the lower level, everything below the lower level and below won't. If you turn it on again somewhere down here, then it will be. Basically, whatever the last setting in the inheritance tree was, everything else will follow suit below that.
Perfect. The answer to this is yes. Can you run scripts on a folder group? And the answer is yes, because I think you showed that last time, right?
Yeah, we can. And now, like I said, we're in the process. It should be this week, adding it where you can run it against all nested folders below a certain folder as well, which is super cool.
Okay. I'm going to read this one out loud. Chris says, this use case is, we currently have a policy that is applied to all residential paid customers. When we have a policy that is applied to all business antivirus customers, then we have specific policies that are specific to our managed customers. For policies specifically for our managed customers, are applied to all devices on their account. We also have a free policy that is for customers that we do not provide any services on other than being able to provide remote services. We want a global policy that applies to all of the existing policies, specifically for the monitoring needs and auto remediation, except the free and a few other. Can this new system do this? This may be a bit much for this webinar, and maybe
I
be
think
better.
me and you, Chris, we need to get in a Zoom here and a special webinar just for you. But if I understand correctly, the way I would probably structure that is if you're saying that this is going to be like your top level policy for all customers, but free ones, I would probably still put this at the top level for everybody because it's going to save you a boatload of time. And for your free ones, I would make a subfolder under that, which would sort of act as your new top level. And I would make whatever changes you want there. And you would just apply your free policy to that and go from there. I think that's the quickest way to do it. The other thing to do would be, I think that is the quickest way, actually. I don't think I can think of a faster way.
Perfect. Richard, when you have lots of items that need to be moved, is there a way to select multiple computers to move them instead of dragging and dropping?
Yeah, it works a lot like Windows File Explorer. So you can use like shift click or control click, select a bunch, and either drag them or use the move. The only caveat to that is you can't do it with assets across multiple folders, and that's to prevent you from accidentally selecting one, not realizing it, and all of a sudden you kind of jacked up your policies there.
Okay. John wants to know when I enable this. Well, I have to immediately go to a customer and see a list of assets that I need to file away into sub policy folders. I know I am already planning to pick up my policies into granular policies and apply specific policies as I need per sub policy folders.
If I understood correctly, no. I'm going to share my screen again here really quick. This is what's going to happen. This is what I was talking about with this migration scenario. When you enable it, we're taking all of your assets, all your policies, we're making subfolders for those policies, applying the policy to it, dumping the respective assets into these folders for you. So day one, you can enable this and then do nothing, and nothing is changing. Your policies are the same, how they're being applied is the same. You're just kind of on the new model. So if you need to take a couple weeks and really think about this and set it up how you want, that's perfectly fine. Nothing is going to change.
Awesome. Ari is saying the system tray seems to get a little wonky when it is in multiple layers of the tree. So currently I have a dedicated system tray folder for each client. Here's an example. I add a default system tray to my top level policy. Then I tried to replace it at lower levels, but it is creating some duplicate items and the order is messed up. Can you get a checkbox in the system tray policy to choose to either replace or add menu items to the existing tray?
That's not functionality we're going to add, but to give some context here, the system tray is additive only. So there is also a bug currently. It's the first one we found, and it should be fixed in a couple days. Items are supposed to deduplicate, meaning if you've got something enabled at the top level and then you have like something specific policy and it's duplicating one of those items, it's not supposed to show up twice. It currently is. That's getting fixed. But the way it works is everything just gets added together. So if you've got like your main block, you want to have a divider, and then somewhere down the line, depending on where the asset lives, you've got different blocks. You can absolutely do that. We didn't want to go as crazy as having every single item be turned on and turned off, because overrides get very janky that way. And the reason I say that is because you actually have to make a policy knowing ahead of time that you want to override something that hasn't yet been added. And so that makes it very, very confusing. There's a couple of things that work that way, like Windows updates is also additive only. Scripts are also that way, where they're only additive. You can't disable a script at a specific level, but alerts and checks and things you can.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, Nate, I want one of the sweet Syncro hats Andy's got on too. Andy's just too cool. I want one. I want one also.
If you guys go to, bug Tatiana about that. She I shouldn't have said that because that's just going to get a million PMs. Sorry. All right, Tatiana.
And Chip, no worries. All you have to do, you don't turn it on or off in the policy section. You need to go to your admin section, RMM preferences, and you'll have the ability to turn on policies there. And then maybe if you're looking at this, Andy, it might be easier to visualize what Matt Seaver's asking at 10:45, instead of me trying to.
Yeah, so he's basically got 3 levels. Level 1 has something on, then 2 is off, and then 3 is on again. I think you're asking if you can force a top level change that would affect all of it. And the answer is no, because again, if you're going bottom up, which is typically how you'd manage assets like in group policy or whatever, you wouldn't want it affecting everything down. Like as you go down, that's where your exceptions live. Your exceptions don't live at the top. So that would be everything that you want happening. And as you go down, I only want this happening for this office or this specific subset of assets or being overridden. So no, it wouldn't work that way.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Sorry if you can hear this plane going over my house. Let's see. John says, sounds like you could have nothing applied to the top level policy, then create a few root subfolders and have them act as their own top level folder, computer server, VM, physical. If I do something like this, will I break your intended mold for future changes?
Nope, that works fine. I will say that makes it a little bit more difficult to manage. I don't know the size of your business, so I'm going to make some assumptions, but when you get big enough, that might be annoying, especially if you're onboarding a bunch of customers every week to basically you're setting up multiple top level policies. The only time you'd really want to do that, like I said, is if you've got multiple offices or something like that. That said, you can absolutely do that, and we're not going to screw that up with some kind of functionality down the road. It does take away your ability to bulk change the top level policy as well, which is also beneficial. So just keep that in mind before you go ahead and do that.
Okay, let's see here.
Oh, I'll take this question from Derek. This is a good one. And this is a good question. I didn't show this, and that's my fault. So Derek is asking, oh, whoops, you killed the question, sorry. So it was something about if you install a new asset, is it going to go into the top level policy? And actually, let me show you that really quick. This is another UI element that we drastically cleaned up. I was not a big fan of our deployment model before, and this looks a whole lot better now. So basically, I picked my customer, and then it's going to show me all the folder levels. So I can put it in any of these folders I want. So if I go ahead and I do it like this, I just pick my deployment type, whatever it is, it's going to dump all of this, anything I install with this public link or with the installer, right into workstations. If you can dump everything into the top level if you want, and you can even have multiple installers that, one for servers, one for workstations. So you can set this up however you want. So for sure.
Okay, let's see here. Few more. Let's grab these last couple. The policy name used to be listed in the assets list, making it easier to tell what policy the asset lives in. That seems to be gone now.
Yeah, it's gone now because again, there is no more notion of one policy being applied to one asset. There is a button for show effective policy on asset records, which is going to show you everything that's being applied, but that could be comprised of 7 different policies. So it really doesn't fit within the confines of that column anymore.
Okay, perfect. 2 more. Can you clarify what you said about scripts being additive only? Does this mean that if I have a script at level 1, then have a few assets at level 2, I don't want that script to run on, it'll still run?
That's correct. So what you would normally do is at the top level, you really would probably only want your onboarding scripts, which is like every asset at this customer, no matter what, has to have this installed. It's like your compliance type stuff. And then at the lower levels is where you would add specific things that you don't want being applied across the board.
Perfect. Can you use a top level RMM agent and use a parameter at install to specify lower level?
No. No. And I'm just thinking if that makes sense to do. I don't know, how often are you finding that you need to like command line stuff that way? If you want to do a follow-up question, I'm curious, but as of now, no. And then John's saying he's using GPO on existing client networks to deploy Syncro agent via the MSI installer. Will I need to generate new MSI installers for my clients since the installer is no longer going to point to a policy? Yes, I would recommend that. We have taken some precautions. So if somebody's using an old installer, particularly for GPO installations where you don't want to go to all these servers and make some changes, it is supposed to dump into the top level folder by default. However, I would definitely recommend updating those, particularly because you probably want servers going into servers folders and certain things going into other folders. But yes, I would update those, but it still will work if you don't.
Amazing. Wow. Let's all just, I wish everyone could just unmute and give a round of applause to Andy for taking those rapid fire questions. Thank you all for joining us today. Amazing questions. I really, really appreciate this. This is being recorded, so if you missed anything, you will be able to catch this. But thank you so much for spending the hour with us. Andy, thank you so much for your time. Amazing feature, like absolutely love this, kind of changes the game. So thank you for spending so much time building as well as explaining. And again, I know like you'll say it too, it's a team thing here at Syncro. There was so many people that have spent so much time and effort on this feature, and it's beautiful and I love it. And I'm so glad to hear you all are loving it as well.
We've said the word policy so many times in the past couple months, and no longer has a meaning to me anymore. And I'd also add that, thanks everybody for the feedback. It's been awesome. We had a lot of, we had hundreds of early access users early on helping us test the feature, give us feedback. But even now we're getting feedback like that little checkbox, which seems like such a small thing. And I wrote the spec, I didn't add it. And I'm like, dude, somebody thought of an idea that was awesome, should have been there, wasn't there, it's there now. So if there's anything else that you guys think of like that, now's the time. I mean, we're listening, it's a new feature. We want to make it as good as humanly possible, which is tough because it is already really, really good. But please send those feature requests into support. We are looking at all of them.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and we'll see y'all soon.
Take
Bye.
care.